Well, Dr. Brook, welcome to the UK.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Well, thank you, and welcome to the Adam Smith Institute, who've kindly hosting our event tonight. So, what do you hope to accomplish on your visit to the UK?
Well, really, what I'm hoping is to increase the exposure of Ayn Rand in the UK. I mean, Ayn Rand has never really sold; her books have never really sold very well here. Her influence has been, I think, fairly marginal in the UK, and yet I think her ideas are so important, so valuable. To both the intellectuals here, to the students. You know, I'm going to Oxford tomorrow and the day after. The idea is to try to increase the visibility of Ayn Rand and her ideas, both to kind of those activists who are involved in defending capitalism on a regular basis, and to the young student population.
And that kind of addresses my second question as well, which is what you see as the most important ways to promote Ayn Rand's ideas in the UK. When you mentioned the universities there, you mentioned...
Well, yeah, I mean, first and foremost, what we do in the US is we're really focused on young people. We're really focused on high school kids and on the universities, and I think that needs to be translated here. I mean, people go through a period in their lives, probably between 16 and 25, when they're open to new ideas and they're willing to accept new radical ideas, and I think we need to capture, get people to read the books at that point in their life, and the more books we can get into the hands of students, the greater success we will have. And then secondly, as I mentioned, I mean, there's some really smart people working in a variety of different think tanks here in Great Britain on issues surrounding capitalism, free markets, and so on. What I'd like to help them do is bring Ayn Rand's unique defense of capitalism to the forefront, because I think that without, as I'll talk about tonight, without that defense of capitalism from a moral perspective, it's very difficult to argue the case for capitalism and to win. I think that from an economic perspective, after all, we've won the debate. Capitalism works, and we can talk about the current financial crisis, but I think the economic problems were solved a long time ago by people like Hayek and von Mises and to some extent Milton Friedman. The real case that needs to be made for capitalism is a moral one, and I'm hoping to bring that kind of to the UK think tank and intellectual environment.
Great. Well, thanks for all your efforts. So on to current affairs then, and the topic of your talk tonight. Yeah. So obviously we're right in the middle of this huge financial crisis. It's absolutely in full swing. We've got serious voices now calling for the nationalisation of all banks in America. These are tough times to be a defender of free markets, a defender of capitalism, of private enterprise. So how do you answer those voices all around the culture today who say that the free market has failed?
I guess I asked them what they're talking about, because I mean, the notion that free markets have failed is bizarre. What free markets is what I asked them. Where have you seen free markets? If free markets mean that the government is not interfering in the economy, if free markets mean that people are left to voluntarily deal with one another, trade, exchange, based on contracts, based on mutual voluntary agreements, then we have no free market. Something has failed, but it certainly isn't that. If you look at the United States, which is I'm much more familiar with than the UK, the two industries that are most affected by this crisis, the housing market and the financial markets, are some of the most regulated, controlled markets anyway. The housing markets, I could go through a whole list of various regulations that the US government has housing policy, as does the UK government. But in the US, it takes the form of anywhere from the fact that your mortgage is interest deductible. So if you take out a big mortgage, you can deduct the interest. If you rent, you can't deduct your rent. So in a sense, what you've got is a situation in the US where the renters are subsidizing homeowners, and people who've paid off their mortgages are subsidizing people who have mortgages. So that's not free. That is a government incentive to take out a mortgage, not just to own a home, but to take out a mortgage. These mortgages are subsidized, particularly mortgages for low-income individuals. Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, these two institutions that together, as of 2007, owned about 50% of all the mortgages in the US, in some form or another, backed those mortgages. They were basically government entities, and they were able to provide, to buy these mortgages and provide very low interest rates because of a government subsidy. The government was guaranteeing their debt. Freddie and Fannie have a huge responsibility for the crisis that we're in today. But housing policy in the U.S. goes beyond that. There's something called the Community Reinvestment Act, where Congress, over the years, has encouraged banks to lend to low-income people. What does that mean? Lending to low-income people means high-risk loans, means subprime loans. Subprime loans, surprise, surprise, are at the core of this crisis. So there's the Community Reinvestment Act, the federal bank home loan. I mean, there's so many government entities. And that's just on the mortgage side. Then if you go to the actual building side, and this is something that is common with the UK, think of all the zoning, the environmental restrictions, the green belts. They restrict the supply of homes. So in the United States, in places like San Francisco and the Bay Area and Southern California where I live, there's very limited supply of where you can actually build homes. That's free? That's not a free market. The government telling me whether I can build on my land or not, that's not freedom. The government owning so much of the land, most people don't know this, but 75% of all the land west of the Mississippi in the United States is owned by either federal, state, or local governments. That's not free, that's not capitalism. And then if you go to the banking sector, banks in the United States are among the most regulated industries in the world. Every aspect of the banking industry is regulated, from deposit insurance, which basically says that you shouldn't care which bank you give your money to as a depositor because it's guaranteed by the government up to $250,000 right now, which provides pretty perverse incentives to bankers to take on risk that otherwise they wouldn't. Two, banks are controlled in terms of how much capital they should take. They're controlled in terms of what loans they could make. Every interest rates are, of course, controlled by the Federal Reserve. So every aspect of the banking industry is controlled by government. So again, what free market, I ask you? What capitalism has failed? And then lastly, but mainly, in a sense most importantly, the very existence of a Federal Reserve, or in the UK, the Bank of England, is a perversion. Here we have a government entity controlling interest rates, controlling the supply of money. Again, why not let markets determine interest rates? Why not let markets determine the supply of money? And the Federal Reserve and the Bank of England have such reach into every aspect of the economy that, again, the question has to be, what capitalism? What, what free markets? What we can say unequivocally is this. The mixed economy, the regulated economy, so the mixture of socialism and capitalism, and the heavy regulation, that has failed. And now it's important to figure out what actually caused the crisis and get rid of that. As I think it turns out, what really caused the crisis is government intervention, and that's what we need to get rid of.
Thank you.